Hey there neighbors, Kevin here at the etrailer, and today we're going to be taking a closer look and showing you how to install the Dexter Vault hybrid lubrication system. The Dexter Vault is going to be a fully sealed system here because we are going to be adding in gasket maker at our connection point at the front of our hub and at a back with our grease seal. This is fully encased and it's going to be pushing in the hybrid oil grease into our bearings, so that way we're keeping a good pressure on there and not allowing any water to potentially leak into our hub. Now, you may have seen a similar option with Bearing Buddies, and that's kind of a similar design where it's a spring-loaded cap that's going to force marine grease into that hub and do essentially the same thing. Now, with Dexter, they took it one step further. They have a hybrid of both oil and grease, where when we're at our standing room temp, so right now it's a lot thicker of a consistency because it hasn't built up any heat with our hub. Now when it starts building up heat because we're rolling down the road, that consistency is going to change into more of an oil. So now you're getting that benefit of an oil bath system where it's going to be flinging the oil around inside of your hub and really coating all those bearings to make sure that they are staying nice and lubricated. Benefit of this system is that you're not going to have to do routine maintenance on this. You're not going to be having to every couple of months or maybe once a year pop that off, swap out your grease, repack your bearings, because this one is sealed up and this one is meant to last at least 5 to 10 years. So the big thing here would be double checking this cap. So you can see the black portion of our cap here. This starts to stick out, especially when it heats up. So when that does heat up, you're going to have a lot of air pressure inside of here, and that's going to force that cap out even further. Now, if you see this cap fully flush on the inside rim here, now you know you got either a leak or that grease is just kind of burned up, and it's time to pop that off and then refill it and also repack all your bearings. Now, if you are in that process where you're going to be repacking, you definitely want to pick up some new grease seals. If you are just starting to switch over this system, you're going to want to replace all of your bearings, replace your grease seal, and really make sure that you do a good job cleaning out your spindle. I would definitely, if you have a Easy Lube spindle, pop on the grease zerk fitting if you don't already have one that they provide in your kit, and then you can force some of the new grease through there, because you do not want to mix greases, especially with this one being a hybrid. Sometimes the chemical composition of that is going to fight with the other grease, and then it'll end up just kind of turning to more of a watery consistency, and then it's going to completely be worthless. So if you are swapping over fully, make sure you replace all of your bearings, your grease seal, and if you're only just doing a repacking here, then you kind of just clean it out with some brake clean and then just replace that grease seal, because there's no way to get your grease seal out without completely damaging it. So like I said, the big benefit here is really just this is a much lower maintenance item, since you don't have to even look at it or really touch it for about 5 years. One other thing with comparing this to any other kind of system out on the market, because typically when you are replacing your bearings and re-greasing everything, it's usually pretty low cost. With this one starting out a much higher price point, what you're kind of assuming is, oh, this is just super expensive and maybe it's not worth it. But if you really factor in what the cost of maintenance would be with all of those other options over the years, it kind of just really breaks even, if not saves you a little bit of money, because you're not buying grease every single year, you're not spending that time repacking it, you're not having to buy extra components, because every single time you pop that off, you're now spraying in brake clean, you're maybe replacing the cap that you have on there, you're replacing the grease seal. So while it is a higher upfront cost, it will save you a lot more money in the long run. As far as installation goes, this one is essentially the same as most of the other styles that you would typically have to do. The only difference is, since this is an oil and grease hybrid, it is a lot less thick. So it kind of pours out on you and you get really messy kind of everywhere. And if you're hammering on anything where that grease is kind of sitting around, it's going to be kind of spraying all over you, because I mean, just look at my pants here. It's got it all over myself, even though I've been wearing a bunch of different gloves, using a bunch of towels. So I would definitely make sure that you have a box of shop towels with you, definitely some extra cardboard to throw under there, or if you have like an oil pan that you could stick under there to capture all that. I would definitely make sure you have dirty clothes that you don't care about and you're ready to get yourself dirty when you do this, because it is going to unfortunately kind of get everywhere. That's really the only drawback that I could really find with this specific system. overall, like I said, it is the same process. You are going to be popping out the cap like you normally would, popping out your grease seal at the back, popping out your bearings, cleaning them out. So make sure you pick up some brake clean so you can really spray those out good. If you don't mind leaving it sitting up on some jack stands overnight, I would maybe even soak your bearings just to really make sure that they're fully cleaned out before you go and you repack them again. Repacking with this grease is a lot easier though, because it is so liquidy, so it kind of really easily scrapes in there if you're hand packing. That is one of the things where I typically don't like hand packing bearings, just because it is such a mess, and it takes forever sitting there trying to scrape it into there when you have a really thick grease. It honestly only took me just a couple seconds to get that fully packed up. So overall, I do think this is something you could do at home, but if you just don't want to get messy, please feel free to use our dealer locator, and you can enter your zip code to find a shop near you and get it professionally installed. Now, if you are wanting to do this yourself, stick around and we'll walk you through it. One of the first things I like to do when I'm starting this off is just break each one of the lug nuts loose while it's still on the ground, so that way when we come back after lifting up by the frame, which I've got a jack stand right over here holding it up at the frame at the back. That way I'm not trying to fight the wheel once this is up in the air trying to get those lug nuts loose. So I've got that all loose at this point. Now I just need to kind of pop them out and then we can take the wheel off. Now there is some prep work you should definitely do before swapping out the grease, just because with this being a hybrid of grease and oil, it is pretty liquidy. So I would definitely grab like an oil catch, or what I'm going to be doing is just throwing down a big chunk of cardboard and then I'm going to put some shop towels over it, just because this kind of gets everywhere. Pop-in cap here, and now you can see our old vault. Now before we take this off, I do want to mention the black little spring here. So this actually can shift in and out on the vault, and I've got another one right here that can kind of show that just a little bit better. So you see how it has some movement to it. So as heat starts to build up in here when we're using our trailer and actually activating the brakes, you'll see that kind of pop out just a little bit more. Now the thing here is, when we're not using it, say this is nice and cold, it's been sitting overnight, if you saw that black plug all the way inside of our vault here, that would tell us that, hey, we may need to actually pop that off and fill it up with some more of the hybrid grease and oil. That way we know that this is going to have enough lubrication inside of it to keep those bearings good. Now what you can see right now is it's sticking out about 1/8 of an inch. That's exactly how we want it to look when it's not actually in use and when we have it full of grease. So at this point now we're going to take our rubber mallet, and this is where I'm going to throw out that cardboard and a couple shop towels. So we're going to be taking apart some components. I would definitely get yourself a box of gloves. You're going to be swapping them out pretty often just because of how dirty this can get. And then a couple of towels for once we get our components out so that we can clean those up. Now I'm going to take a rubber mallet, and what we'll do is just kind of spin it around, and we're going to try and hit this at almost like a 45-degree angle towards ourselves, and that's going to help kind of pop it out of our hub. And when you start getting to the end here, just like that, you can see just how much grease is in there and how liquidy that is, where it's just going to pour right on out. So we'll come back with our towel. We're going to clean this up. Now with this axle, we're going to have a cotter pin that's sticking through the spindle, and then a little nut retainer, and that's this guy right here on the outside. Once we get that off, then we can take off the spindle nut and the D-shaped flat washer. Well, looks like we are going to be replacing the cotter pin as well. Cotter pin will not come with this kit. I typically have a bunch of these on hand, so I always just replace them when I can. Just makes it a whole lot easier instead of trying to jam a bent up pin back in. So I would definitely pick some up extra before you start this install, just to make your life a lot easier. This cap, or retention cap here for our nut, can just be cleaned off. And we'll set that aside. We're going to reuse that. Clean this up. This nut should only be hand tight. Looks like it's a little bit more than that. So I've got a pair of channel locks I'm going to pop that off with. Feels like we got some debris stuck in the threads here. So I'm going to spray this with some brake clean once I get all these components out, just to kind of clean them up and make sure everything's good. You can also take a little wire brush through the threads and kind of clean that up as well. On this one, we're going to take our caliper off. We're going to pop out that outer bearing and that flat washer, and I'm going to clean those up. I'm going to, like I said, spray those down with some brake clean. It's kind of hard to tell. Like normally when you're doing a grease job and you're repacking your bearings, your grease looks all brown or black, kind of like this is, just right out of the tube. Now the only real difference I'm seeing between our dirty grease and the new grease, just because it is a dark color, is really just it looks a lot shinier. Opened end here, where it's a little bit wider spacing, is a lot easier to spray through so that you can get everything to kind of come out the front here. So that's what we're going to do with some brake clean, just to kind of clean this up a bit more. I'll set that aside, let that dry off, and we'll keep trucking along. I clean off our spindle. Now our spindle is a easy lube, but at the same time they took off the little grease zerk fitting. I'm going to put a new one on because there is one included in the kit, and they only give you one, so I think it's more so just to like stick on, use to kind of clean out, and then also add in a little bit more before you stick the cap back on and you have the hub in place. Because right at the back here, right where our grease seal sits, is where the actual fitting comes through. So we would be pumping a bunch of lube in through our spindle. It'll pop out here, and then it kind of pushes that all forward. So that way you can really fill up the entire cavity. I'm gonna use the grease zerk fitting so I can first clean out the grease that is in there. So with a 5/16 wrench, we can tighten this down. We don't need to go crazy tight because we are gonna take this back off. And we also don't want to potentially bust this off inside of here, because you can break grease zerk fittings off inside of the spindle, and then you're going to have to sit there, drill it out, and then re-tap it so you can get a new one in there later on. And that's just a big hassle you don't want to deal with. So just real careful as you're tightening it up. Now I grab my grease gun and a paper towel. It's going to come squirting out all over. Before you throw your lubricant provided in this kit into your grease gun, I would definitely swap it out for a brand new one, because you don't want to mix and match your oil and greases. With this one being a hybrid of both, I wouldn't think it'd be compatible with any other kind of grease out there. So I would definitely pick up an extra grease gun. I just pulled this specifically for this job just to make sure that we weren't mixing up the greases and potentially contaminating them and then having them break down. So like I said, now we will squirt some out. You can see it coming out of that fitting. Just do 3 or 4 squirts. That's probably enough to get through there. We're gonna start working on our hub. We're gonna pop out our grease seal. What I typically do is just take a flathead screwdriver, usually one of the fatter ones if you have it, and then a hammer, and we're just gonna kind of beat down on our grease seal, and usually if you hit it from one side, it'll kind of pop up the other side and you can get it out pretty easily. Although because I said that, it's now going to fight me. Running it around and cleaning out the grease, trying to get all of that old gasket maker out too. I don't want that to be a potential reason why it leaks later on. The face of our hub, if you look down inside of there, there's a little gasket or O-ring right here. And they give you replacements for it, and that's what we're going to swap out right now. So we'll pull this out of the hub. I know this was a question that we had on the expert team. I saw they were asking for some videos showing exactly how to replace it and where it goes, and now we have an opportunity to actually show that off. So here is where that goes. Clean that up real good. I actually spray that with some brake clean too. Then we can slip in our new one. It's going to fight a little bit there. There we go. Alright, now that that's in there, we got this cleaned up a bit. Come back to the back set here, and like I said, I wanted to really get all that old gasket maker out. I'm going to probably scrape that one more time. So at this point now, we're going to start packing our bearings. I am going to just get a good glob of it in my hand. Now, if you've ever seen someone pack bearings by hand before, typically that grease is a lot thicker, so it takes a little bit more time for it to really come through the bearing. On this one, with it being so thin, because it's an oil and grease mixture, kind of just blows right through it real fast. So the goal here is on the bottom side where it's more open, we're going to sit there and kind of just scrape. And then you'll see it pop up on the top here. So I'll give you a little bit of an example there. As I sit there and scrape it, you see it start to kind of come up between the bearings, and it's popping out the top now. Now normally, when you're doing this, you got like a red or a green or a blue grease, and it's real easy to tell when you're getting the dirty grease out and the new grease in. This one, since it's already the same color, makes it a little bit more challenging to make sure that you really cleaned it out. So in this case, I'd either replace the bearings each time I was doing this, or I'd really probably soak it overnight in some brake clean. We're going to just keep doing that until it's all throughout here. I'm probably going to have to squirt a little bit more in my hand to fully get this one. And then once we get it all throughout, then I'm going to come back and just kind of smear it all over the outside too, because we want to keep all of those little rollers nice and lubricated too. Once you have it all lubricated up, I like to stick my two fingers from the middle so I can drop it down nice and evenly into our race. And then next we are going to get our grease seal and put that on. I'm going to take my gloves off, get all that gross grease out of the way. And we're going to want to pick up some gasket maker too, because we're going to put that on the outside of our grease seal. So we're going to put a real thin line around here, and then just kind of smear it around. And once again, I'm going to set that down in there. And now we are going to grab our hammer, and in my case, I'm going to drive this in using a bottom of a hole saw. So what we want is something that's nice and sturdy. This hole saw is really thick metal at the base, and it's wider than the bore hole here for our hub. So that's going to make sure that as I drive this in, I can't push it past the lip of our hub here. We don't want that to start sinking in too far. You want that just nice and flush with the bore hole here. So I'm going to set that on there, and we'll drive this in real quick. And then I'm going to wipe off that gasket maker, come out with it. This is where you want to kind of feel it, make sure it didn't sink in too far, but also that it's flush. Feels good to me. So that's all good now, and at this point if you wanted to, you grab like a little bit of grease and just kind of smear it just on the inside. Not much, just enough to kind of help lubricate it so it slips onto the spindle a little bit easier. And we'll also put a little bit on our spindle when we're ready to put it up in place. All right, I'm gonna put a little bit of lube on our spindle and kind of smear that around. Don't have to go super crazy with it because we are gonna fill this up with that grease zerk fitting right after. Now we can throw our hub on, put it in there nice and straight. Fight the caliper here though. Make sure we're fully in place. And I'm going to throw one of the caliper bolts back in to help hold that up while we get this fully in. Alright, now I'm going to pack my outer bearing. We'll get that in. Then we're going to throw on our flat washer, our axle nut, and then our retainer clip. So this is, once again, we're going to squeeze a bunch of this into our hand. You can see it kind of starting to come out, all those little sections there between the rollers. Smear it all around. We're going to pop that in place. I'm going to clean my gloves off before I touch the rotor here though. Alright, I'm going to get my D-shaped flat washer in there. That's going to help keep even pressure on our axle, on our bearing. And then the axle nut we can throw on. All right, now we're going to torque this so that way we can fully seat our bearings, and we should have no play with our rotor. So what you can do at the end of this is just kind of pull side to side and see if it has any wiggle room. If it has wiggle room, we didn't fully seat that bearing. So here's where I would grab it. I'm not really getting any play out of it, so that's good. At this point now, I'll back it off, and then we're just going to go finger tight with it. So I got it loose now. Now I'll finger tighten it, and you really don't want to go past that. We don't want to go too hard to where now it's going to pinch those bearings, and then it's going to cause more issues when they start to heat up. After that, now we can throw on our retainer clip, making sure that we have it at a opening for our cotter pin to poke through. And we can just bend up our pieces on it. And that'll prevent that from being able to come out. Now we're going to reuse that grease zerk fitting right here, and we're going to pump until we start to see grease coming out all along behind our flat washer here. So essentially what we're doing is filling up this whole cavity, so that way water is not going to get in here and end up giving us issues. And it will take a while. It is quite a few squirts with your grease gun, so you're going to have to be patient with it. There we go. I'm starting to see it pop up right there. All right, now we can stop. And at this point, I'm going to wipe off that grease zerk fitting, and we're going to take that back off because we're going to have to reuse that for our other hubs, so that way we can clean it out and then pump it full of our grease. Now we can fill up our Vault, and we're going to fill it all the way up to that snap ring. So what I'm going to do is put a bunch in here, and then I'll kind of tap it against the floor just so that I can kind of make sure everything kind of sinks down and we don't have any air pockets. Alright, so that's pretty good. We're all filled up there. At this point on the outside, a lot of people are also using gasket maker on that outer ring right there. So we can do that as well. We'll take just a tiny bit. I'm going to probably just do a little dot and then smear it. I don't want to go crazy and get this everywhere. Now in their kit, they're going to give you a 2-inch down to a 1-inch or 1.5-inch reducer piece of PVC. And what you can do is you can use that to hammer it in. I have a tool that does that a little bit better just because it fully encases it. So I'm going to go ahead and use that instead because then I have something easier to kind of hit. If I was going to use this on here, I'd probably put a chunk of 2x4 or something across that just to keep even pressure, because if you start hitting it on one of the edges, it's going to want to make that side drive in, but not drive in straight. And then you're crooked, and then it's just going to fight you the whole way. You got to drive this in perfectly straight. So that's where our little tool here is going to come into play. And then we'll take our hammer. This isn't driving in perfectly straight. Sometimes it's easier also if you just kind of get down. Hitting it at an angle can make it a little bit harder. All right, we're getting in a bit. We'll spin that around. Spinning that around will kind of help spread the grease around inside of our hub as well. And we can just finish it off with a shop towel, kind of clean up any of that gasket maker or grease that might be on the vault. It's going to do it for the vault install portion of this. Now it's just really reassembling your setup here. So that's going to be putting probably a little bit of Loctite on the caliper bolts. A lot of the time people like to use blue Loctite, and that's what we would typically recommend as well. I just kind of threw those in there hand tight when I was getting the rotor in place and getting everything kind of set up. So that's not fully in there. So we're also going to need to torque these down to spec as well after we get that blue Loctite on there. And then we're going to throw on our wheel and then torque our lug nuts, because we don't want that wheel coming off on us when we're out on our trip. Now that we've gone over just some of the basics of this system and shown you how to install it, that's going to do it for our video today. But if you still have some questions, what's going to be the right fitment, especially for your specific setup, or you just have more questions in general of how it works, please feel free to reach out to us via our Ask the Experts link, a comment on this video, or a phone call to our customer service department, and we'd be happy to help you out on your journey.